Hello, Lizzy here, and today I'm going to show you how to make Maysen. This is our lovely big roomy handbag which has pockets in the front and the back. It also has short handles and a long handle that you can take on and off with lobster clasps. So that's optional, but I quite like it that we've got the option of using the long handle or the two short handles. I'm also using a decorative zip, so it's really pretty, and also you can see we're using contrasting fabric as well. It's got a nice strong bottom to it, so I'll go through all the things that you need for this project. So the pattern for Maysen is actually a download on my website, so lizzycurtis.com, and I'll put the link down there in the description for you. Some of the key ingredients to this bag is you'll need some piping cord, you'll need a decorative zipper, but you could use an ordinary zipper if you haven't got a decorative one. I've used quite a medium weight interfacing, and I've used a foam stabilizer as well. On the base, I've actually used the heavier weight Decorative interfacing, so you might want to source that. I'm also using rivets as well for the first time for any of my patterns. I'm using rivets just to make it decorative, and we're using lobster clasps as well. So that's a little bit of a rough idea of what you'll need. You'll need a good 1/2 metre of fabric for the outer, and a contrasting fabric would be nice. A fat quarter would probably do, and then the lining fabric as well. But in the download it has everything you need listed quite clearly. So the first thing we're going to do is to make up the short strap that goes from the pocket up and over. We're also going to attach the pocket to the front panel and then attach the side panels as well. We're going to do the pocket first with the strap because we need to put the rivets in, and it's always better to do that without it joining to the other pieces of fabric. So the first thing we're going to do is actually stitch the handle itself. So it's a 2.5 inch strip. All the measurements will be on the pattern. I've just folded a little piece under. We're going to fold again, and we're going to top stitch down both long sides. So I'm going to bring my machine in to do that. So you're folding those two little short sides in that you folded over, and you're just going down the front. Quite a long stitch because it's a top stitch. You could use contrasting thread, that would be nice. So just bring those folded edges together. Now I haven't neatened the ends of this because they're going to go inside the pocket. I'm just going to stitch across that short end and come up the other side. So there's my strap completed. So now we need to attach it to our pocket. Now with the pocket, I've already put the interfacing on. It's a medium weight, and I've folded that in half. And so this will be the top of our pocket here. And I'm going to place my strap 1/2 inch in from the raw edge, either side. Make sure you don't twist the strap. I'm going to measure it, and then I shall top stitch it on, and then I'll put the rivet in. You'll see how that's done. Let's just move this out the way just for a moment. So with my heat erasable pen and my tape measure, I'm going to measure in 1/2 inch, which is the seam allowances throughout the whole bag is 1/2 inch. Usually I do 1/4 inch, this time I'm doing 1/2 inch. So if I bring my pocket in that's already folded and pressed, I'm going to mark in 1/2 inch from that side seam there, from that raw edge. So there's my 1/2 inch mark there. And then on this one, this side, I'm doing 1/2 inch again. So now all I'm going to do is attach my straps. So we'll use a pin just to hold it in place. So just make sure your strap is not twisted. And then you're going to pop it inside where the pocket will be. So think about how this is going to be top stitched down onto your bag front. I'll put a pin there to hold it, and can you see the edge of the strap is just against that little mark there, and that's where we just measured. Bring the other side around, again get another little pin, and I've tucked it in about, I'd say about 3/4 of an inch, and then put a pin in there. So now I'm going to top stitch all the way across here. I'll just bring my machine in. And when I top stitch, it's about 1/8 of an inch. Don't go over your pins. So nice and neat, nice straight line. You can always draw that line if you're a little bit unsure. Take your time, take your pins out as you go. And there's our handle in place, and that's what it looks like on the inside. Well, we're going to put the rivets on now. So, if you've never used rivets before, they really are very, very easy. You need some sort of mat to put your hole through, or you can use a bradawl and poke a hole through. And the kit that I use actually comes with a tool you can punch to actually make that hole. So all I'm going to do is line this up on my mat, and I'm going to punch a hole through there and through there. So you need a little bit of force behind it. And of course you could measure this so it's absolutely precise. So there's one hole there, and put the other hole there. So we've got two nice big holes there. So we need our pretty button on the top. So that goes in there like that. And then that fits into my little tool here. That button just sits in that little groove. And then on this side, we put the other end. And that pins its way through. You can hear it clip together and a little bang, but I'm going to move my mat out the way. Just mind your fingers. So there we are, so there's one rivet in place. So let's do that on the other side. Don't forget your pretty button goes on the right side of your fabric, and the other side, the male part, goes on the back side, and it clicks, so you can hear it click. And again, it just sits in that dish, and you might want to hold that all in place. Just a nice little hammer does the trick. And that's our rivets in place. It makes a lovely, lovely finish, purely decorative. So now what we're going to do is to actually attach this to our front panels. So there's our main front panel there, the bigger size, and that goes underneath. So if I pop that down there, you can see how that looks. And we can get a few clips in just to hold that together. And we're going to stay stitch our pocket to that front panel. And where we made that mark, we know that's our seam allowance, so just keep clear of that. There we go. I'll put another clip in there just to make sure. So for the moment, what we're going to do is stay stitch that in place. If I hold that up. So at the top of the pocket, down and up. And again, it's about 1/8 of an inch. Okay, so that's our pocket stay stitched in place. Now we need to put the side panels on, so you have two of those for the front and 2 for the back, and obviously right sides together. Now don't forget your seam allowance is 1/2 inch, so you're going from the top down to the bottom, and don't forget to be careful of the handles, make sure they're well out of the way. Now I have some masking tape on my machine to measure that 1/2 inch. I don't have a 1/2 inch foot. You may well have, I don't even know if they exist, but I use a piece of tape. So just be careful when you're going past where the handles are. Little back stitch to hold there. So there's one piece in place. So now we're going to do the other. So right sides together. Remember your 1/2 inch seam allowance. And just pull those straps out of the way, pull the handle out of the way if you feel it's getting a bit near. So when we open it up, this is what it looks like. And all we're going to do now, give it a good press and then top stitch. So if I hold that up like this, you're going to press it and top stitch those panels. So it just neatens it off, keeps all the seams in one place. And just make sure those seams go out towards the back. So there's the front of our bag already made up, and we've already made the back of the bag, so we're good to go. So this is now where you iron on your foam. So your foam should be single-sided fusible bag foam to make it nice and stabilised, and now this is when we're going to iron that on. So I'll go ahead and do that. You can come back to me in a second. So now I've put the foam stabiliser on there, and so it's made a really good base for the bag. So you can see I've got a good 1/2 inch away from the seam. I never put my foam right up to the seams. I always go whatever the seam allowance is inside. I just find that easier for me. You may want to do something a little different. So that's my front and back done. So the next thing we need to do is actually install the zip. Now my zip is far too long, which actually is to my advantage because it means I've got a lot of leeway of where to put the zip slider, and that's entirely up to you. You can obviously get one that's actually the right length, which is about 12 inches. So all we're going to do is actually fold the edge of our top of our bag over and actually just top stitch it down. So the actual zip itself, let me show you this way. So let's just clip that handle right out of the way. Now it keeps it from getting to be a nuisance. There we go. So the top of the bag there, we're just going to fold that seam allowance over like that, and our zip is actually going to go over the top like that. So we'll do one side and then we'll do the other, and I've changed to my zipper foot to allow me to do that. So let's get on with that. So I've just folded over that top seam allowance, make sure you've got the right side. And then I'm just going to lay my decorative zip over the top. I'm just going to take it off the edge a little bit so I don't have to worry about that zip slider. So now I'm just going to top stitch that in place. It's as simple as that, because your lining is going to cover up your raw edges on your outer fabric. And again, you could use a contrasting thread, or you could stick with the thread that matches the colour of your bag. And again, you're folding under and your zip goes over the top. Now with this zip, fortunately it's got a lovely pattern that I can follow. It's really pretty. And you could always do a double row if you feel that it needs it. So we're just folding that under, laying our zip over the top. Habit says you want to do it the other way around. So again, just folding under and zip over the top. So there's one side installed. You can see how that looks. And from the other side, our lining will come up to there and cover all of those raw edges. So just make sure you've caught everything, that everything is in place, and then you can just go ahead and do the other side. And just make sure that you line everything up so your edges are lined up. So again, I'm just going to clip my handle out of the way. And again, you're just literally folding under and putting it under. Oh, sorry, putting the zip over the top. But just like I say, make sure that your edges line up. So when I've stitched this, I'll show you. And like I say, you could always do another row stitching if you're not too sure whether you've caught it. And just make sure your zipper teeth aren't getting caught up with the fabric as well. And obviously this is a decorative zip, so if you're using just a regular zip, you just want to install it in the usual way. So folding under, placing your decorative zip over the top. I think it's quite a nice feature of this bag. And there we are. So there's our zipper in place. And when we look at the other side, you can see that it's all, the zipper is nicely caught in there. And of course, when we get to do the lining, all that'll be covered. So let's just pop. So now we've got the zipper installed, we've got the main body of the bag done. All we need to do now is to stitch the little tabs. So we're going to put a tab here on the end of the zip here centrally and on the end here, and that actually keeps the zipper all in place, because you can see I've actually cut the zipper off now, make it nice and neat. So all I'm going to do is stitch the tabs and put the D-rings on and actually stay stitch them to each end of the bag. So I've stitched my two little tabs, so I've just stitched and top stitched the long side, so that makes it nice and neat. So all I need to do now is fold them in half and pop my D-ring through like that. And that's how that looks. So all I'm going to do is I'm going to stay stitch that together first and then stitch it onto my bag. Same with the other one, just fold it in half and slip your D-ring on so it looks like that. So now we have our two D-rings ready to put into our bag. So if I bring my bag in, I'm just going to top stitch those in place right in the centre of the zip. So again, it is just a stay stitch. Just make sure you've got those in the middle. Be careful when you're going over your zip. Even though this one is just nylon, you still want to be very careful. So on the open end, again, you want to make sure that those zip teeth come together. And make sure your tab is right in the centre. I'll show you in a second. Go carefully over the zip teeth. So let's just move this out the way. So when we look at it like this, I think I'll keep my handles tucked away. You can see that the tabs with the D-rings are just attached just with a stay stitch across the top of the zip there, and that holds the zip in place, and then you've got a tab on either side of that beautifully. So the next thing we need to do is to actually do our piping. Now I'm using contrasting fabric so it matches my pockets. The instructions again, width and length are all in the instructions, and all I'm going to do is pop my piping cord inside, just catch that inside with I'm going to use my zipper foot again, ready to actually put into the seam. So you're literally, let's just pop that out of the way, you're literally just encasing your piping. You don't have to go right up to the piping edge because you'll do that when you stitch that in, but I'm just going to make sure it's secure. And again, keeping your zipper foot on is a great thing to do now because it keeps everything in place. Now, although we're not securing that piping, you want to be careful you don't pull it through by mistake. So you're just doing 2 pieces of this. It's not difficult. You don't need to be, it doesn't need to be on the bias. You're not going around any corners. Not really. Even though we've got the curve of the bag, it's not really necessary to do a bias. So there's our piping done. I'll just trim that down. So you can see I've just done 1 long stitch all the way along. I suppose it's about 1/2 inch from the edge of the piping there. So we'll just do the same with the other side. So 1 long strip, 1 long piece of piping, and you're just making a piping sandwich. Nothing scary. So a quick mention about my Gold Club. If you haven't joined already, there's no time like the present. Just pop to my website, find the link that says Gold Members Sign Up here, and then you have access to my Facebook weekly events, which is absolutely amazing. My girls love it. And of course you get the free patterns as well. So if you want more information, there is actually a video on YouTube that you can have a little look at. But like I say, as you're tucking that piping in, just be careful you don't pull it out by mistake. So the piping is about 5mm, so it's quite substantial. Again, like I said, all the instructions are in the pattern. So there's our second piece done. So now we can actually stitch this onto our bag. Now we're going to put the ends on last. It's easier to put the binding, the piping, onto a straight piece like the bag body than try to do it when we're putting the ends on. So I'm going to stitch that down now. Now you might want to trim this back, and I will do that. So I'm going to trim it back to just over the 1/2 inch, just so I'm not dealing with so much bulk. So I want to make sure I keep to my seam allowance of 1/2 inch. So just trim that back. And you might wonder why we don't cut it to size. Well, it's just easier for you when you're putting the piping in that you've got a lot more fabric to handle and to make sure it's folded over and catching that piping. And that's all really. So just trim it to size. Now this time we're going to go just inside of that stitch line that we've just done. So when I say inside, you're going to do another line that's closer to the piping. So there's one. And here is the other. Now this is going to be too long for our piece, which is intentional, and then you've got a little bit of wriggle room. So I'm not going to do this at a 1/2 inch because I'm going to do that in the final stage when I stitch the whole bag together. So again, I'm just going to offer it up to my machine. I've got my 1/2 inch line there, but I'm just going to ignore that and bring that in a little bit and just bring my piping in. Let's get that a little bit closer to there. And again, use your zipper foot because it means you can get closer to the piping. Just get my machine foot out of the way. And if you've got a zipper foot that has a nice open edge to it, that's perfect for this technique. Again, we're coming over the teeth of the zip and the tab as well, so an awful lot of fabric going on there. So just be careful, take your time. So there's our binding installed. I'm just going to, there's our piping, just going to trim that now. So there's one side done, and if I hold it up you'll be able to see what that looks like. And then I'm going to do the other side. So exactly the same again. So it's not quite half an inch because that's your seam allowance for the bag. So again, just offer it up. Careful you don't stitch through the piping. It's nice and soft, so you might be tempted to do that. And of course you don't have to do this part. You could leave this out if you feel that it's too much out of your comfort zone. But it makes a nice finish. Again, just going over the zip teeth there, so just take your time. Even with a strong machine like I use, I always respect my machine. So there we are, just coming to the end now. Just cut our threads off. And then I'm just going to trim my piping so it's nice and neat. So that's how it looks. So now what we're going to do is actually put our end pieces on. And again, it's right sides together. So what I would do here is, and on the pattern it tells you where to clip. So you're going to fold it in half. Make sure that is accurate. You could do this before you put your foam stabilizer on, and cut a little piece, just a little nick. And that's exactly going to go, if I hold it that way, that goes exactly where the middle of the zip is. So that's where you can kind of clip that there if you want to with the quilting clip, just to hold it all together. And if you want to, you could start from there. I always put my straight edge on top and the rounded edge underneath. I find that a little bit more user-friendly, if you like. But the other thing I want to do as well is just to clip into my straight stitch, my straight seam, my straight piece, just because it helps to go round the curves. So I'm clipping in about halfway down my straight edge, and the same on the other side. And that helps it bend around that curve of the end of the bag. So what I'm going to do now is just go and stitch that, and I'll come back to you in a second. So now we just need to attach the other end to the bag, and again I've snipped into the centre, so I've made a little nick in there so I know that is exactly the centre of the side of my bag, and I'm going to clip this to my bag right in the centre of the zip. Now before I do that, all I need to do is just snip into my straight edge, which is my main bag body, about 1/4 of an inch and about 1/4 of an inch in, thereabouts. You don't want to go any further than your seam allowance, and you're just snipping into that, and that will allow that piece of fabric to curve around the end of the bag. So it's just a case of few little snips. You don't have to go all the way because we've got a nice straight edge here. So what I'm going to do is put that centre mark there that I've just cut a little notch out of, into the centre of where my zip is, and I'm going to put it in with a clip just to hold it all together. So just be cautious of all of those layers, and also be cautious of your piping cord as well, because that's sitting in there too. So that's how we're going to attach it, but actually it's much easier if you get your clips and clip about every inch, inch and a half, especially going around those curves. So all I'm going to do is bring those edges up together and just put a clip in, and just take your time over this, because this will help you get the most perfect results. So again, we're just going to clip those two pieces of fabric together, and obviously just be aware of your seam allowance as well. You might find you need to adjust that slightly depending on where you've stitched your piping cord. But at the end of the day, you'll end up with the most beautiful bag. And again, just keep clipping round with that fabric so all of the layers are laying nicely together. And now I would take that right down to the end. So if I just put those two ends together, so we can start stitching there and take it all the way around. So just clip those two end pieces together, and then we can work that fabric in. And again, just bring this all around. Let's just put that inside out. So you're just bringing those two seams together here, and you're clipping them together with quilting clips just to hold them together. So again, we'll start at the bottom edge and put a clip in, and then we'll just add a few more as we go around the curve. So take it up to the end of the straight, and then just bring those curves in together. And because you've clipped that straight piece of fabric, it actually wants to bend around the curves. Kind of does it for you. It's lovely. If you hadn't clipped, you might have found that a little bit more tricky. So just get those pieces together there. So about every inch or so at the top, you can see how many clips I've got in, just to make that nice and curvy. So we're going to put it under the machine and go all the way around, and I'll come back to you when I've done that. So there's the main body of the bag done. We've put our ends on, so that looks really neat. I love the orange piping. I've released the handles from the clips because we don't need to worry too much about them getting in the way now. So all we need to do now is to actually pop the base on. And the base has already been stabilised. It's got Decorative on the fabric side, if you like, and then we've got our foam over the top of that. So it's a really nice strong base, really sturdy. It's not going to sag. So the procedure is exactly the same. So it's right sides together, and you're going to clip those with your quilting clips just to hold everything in place. And again, I would put these down every inch, inch and a half, just to make sure everything is kept in place. Oh, and don't forget to open up your zip, because once you put the base in, you won't be able to turn it through. So let's just pop this through. There we go. So again, it's right sides together. Now when it comes to the piping, I would face your piping to the side of the bag, so those two ends will go in. If you do that on all four sides, then it will look all consistent. So just be aware of that when you get to the corners. So it's literally a case of popping this. I would find the middle again. I would clip into your middle and find your middles, but just clip those together all the way around. Again, you've got a nice 1/2 inch seam allowance. Like that. So you're going to do that all the way around the bag, so that base is attached, and then you're literally going to stitch all the way around. When you get to the corners, just be careful to pivot and turn to make a really nice sharp corner, and make sure those pieces of piping go towards the sides and not to the front or the back. So I'm just going to go ahead and do that now. So there is our Maysen almost completed. You can see what that looks like on the ends now, where I've said how that piping goes in towards the the end panels rather than the other way around, and that's the same both ends, that they sort of tuck in nice and neatly. So that's it done. You need to repeat some of those steps then again for the lining. I've completed the lining here. Let me turn it the right way out. Now I've done the front panels and the back panels exactly the same as the outer, which means you've actually got 2 additional pockets inside the lining here. Can you see? So I've done it exactly the same. It's not a solid lining, and obviously that's going to be turned the other way around, so the right sides are going inside. And then all I need you to do is actually fold over the top edges. I want you to hold that up so you can see. Fold over the top edges by a good 1/2 inch, leaving a bit of a gap there for the zip. That just gets tucked inside. So if we open up the zip of Maysen and pop that inside, now this is where you can hand stitch the lining in place, or you could glue, and I think I might even just glue this. So if I just clip that in place so you can see what it looks like. I'll do it one side and then turn it so you can see. I quite like a hand stitch finish, but with this I might just get my fabric glue and glue it together. It's strong enough, that's why it's fabric glue, because it's nice and strong. And obviously you're going to match up the seams to the seams of the front so it all looks the same. I'm not sure I've got this completely matched up, but if I turn that around and show you that that's how your lining will go, and you're either going to glue it, you could even top stitch it on the sewing machine, but you'll only go so far because you've got the ends of the bags, so it might be better to hand stitch or glue that lining in place. But if you make it up exactly the same as the bag, that'll fit in there beautifully. Make sure you adhere to the good 1/2 inch seam allowance, and then it will fit in there really nice and neatly, and you've got a super lining with 2 pockets inside. But we also need to make the long strap as well, so I'll just pop the bag out of the way. Now I've already stitched the long strap, and it's exactly the same as the tabs and the short handles I did, but this time we're going to use some hardware. So the first thing you need to do is to actually attach the slider. So a slider is like a little rectangle with this centre piece of metal that you're going to thread this through. So you're literally going to thread it in one side and thread it up the other. So if I just can do that with one hand here. So it looks like that. Now you could use your rivets to actually put those 2 pieces of fabric together, and you could have a rivet sort of here and here. That would look very neat, and use silver ones or brass ones, whatever match your bag. But this time I'm just going to stitch that together here just so we can see what that looks like. So I could use a little quilting clip just to hold those edges together, and we're just going to stitch across there to hold that. So if I hold it up like that, you'll see what that looks like. And so I'm just going to stitch across to hold it. I think I might put rivets on this as well. And I would just do 2 rows of stitching. I just go back on myself and just cut my threads. And that's plenty enough to actually hold that in place. And obviously just neaten off your threads there. So the next thing we need to do is to attach one of the lobster clasps to this. So I'll just I always have to lay this out a certain way so I don't get confused. So I'm just popping one of the lobster clips on the other end, and just sliding that down. So I've got a lobster clasp here threaded through, and there's my piece with the slider on. And all you're going to do is have the wrong side facing you, so where you've stitched here, have that facing you, and you're just going to thread your other end through that, and again. And that's what makes your slider, so it alters the length of your strap. So this will be clipped on one side, so we could do that so you can see what it looks like. Let's do that. Oops. So that just clips onto there, so it means you can take it off. And then if you follow it all the way around, so we just need to attach a lobster clasp at this end. So again, think about your right side and your wrong side. So I'm going into the top and round, and I'll put a little clip there so you can see. and it holds all those layers together. It's a bit of a puzzle to when you first go to do this as to how it all gets threaded through, and then this just gets clipped onto the other side. And of course you could pop this inside of the bag so you don't have to have it out all the time. And that is your long strap made, and of course you've got the ability to actually make it even shorter if you want to, or make it even longer if you want to, because you've used a slider. It's a really great technique to learn actually, but then again we could just take this off, and obviously I need to stitch that one. We could just take this off. Let's get that, there we go. And take this one off this side. There we go. And just pop it away in our bag so we can use it another time. So there we are. So there is our lovely Maysen made, beautiful with the orange contrast, and I hope you make loads.